The Spanish arrived expecting war. Instead, they found silence. Cities abandoned mid-construction, reservoirs empty. 10 million people gone. No mass graves, no burned cities. They had just left. And once you understand why, you'll never look at modern success the same way. Imagine a society that optimized everything. They tracked time with extreme precision. They engineered their environment. They organized food, water, labor, and belief into a single unified system. They didn't guess. They calculated. They didn't adapt to change. They planned for a world that never changed. For centuries, it worked, and then they disappeared. Not because of invasion, not because of ignorance, but because the system they trusted demanded perfection in a world that doesn't allow it. I'm not talking about a startup. I'm not talking about a government. I'm talking about the Maya. And once you understand why they collapsed, you'll never look at modern success the same way again.
Act 1. The Disturbance.
When the Spanish arrived in Central America, they expected resistance. They expected armies, fortifications, cities preparing for war. Instead, they found silence. Stone cities swallowed by jungle, palaces abandoned mid-construction, reservoirs empty, roads leading nowhere. In places where tens of thousands once lived, there was no one left to conquer. This wasn't the aftermath of a war. There were no mass graves, no burned cities, no final battle. The people hadn't been killed. They had left, and no one knew why. At its peak, the Maya civilization covered an area larger than modern Germany. More than 10 million people lived inside it. Their cities were planned. Their calendars were precise. Their engineers built water systems in places with no rivers. This was not a fragile society waiting to collapse. And yet, sometime between the 8th and 9th century, the Maya cities emptied. The monuments stopped being built. The calendars stopped being carved. And the most advanced civilization in the Americas simply walked away from itself. Historians call this the Maya collapse. But that word hides the real mystery, because collapses usually look like violence. This one looked like a system being abandoned piece by piece by the very people who depended on it. To understand why the Maya walked away from their cities, you first have to understand just how advanced they really were.
Act 2. The Miracle.
To understand why the Maya collapse is so disturbing, you have to understand just how extraordinary they were. This wasn't a lucky society. It wasn't a simple one. It was a civilization built on calculation. The Maya didn't just track time, they mastered it. Their calendar was so precise that it could predict solar eclipses centuries in advance, more accurate than anything in Europe until the invention of the mechanical clock. They didn't guess when to plant crops. They didn't hope the seasons would behave. They measured the sky, counted the days, and aligned their entire society around cosmic cycles they believed governed reality itself. This was not superstition. It was systems thinking, written in stone. The Maya lived in one of the most difficult environments on Earth: dense jungle, thin soil, no major rivers, and instead of adapting to the environment, they engineered it. They carved reservoirs into limestone. They redirected rainfall. They built raised fields and terraced hillsides to squeeze food out of hostile land. Every drop of water was planned for. Every harvest was scheduled. This wasn't survival. This was optimization. Their cities weren't chaotic sprawl. They were designed systems. Causeways connected urban centers like arteries. Plazas controlled movement and ritual. Architecture reinforced belief, reminding everyone who ruled and why the system mattered. And at the center of it all stood the elite, kings who weren't just political leaders, but living symbols of cosmic order. The Maya didn't believe their rulers governed by force. They believed they governed by alignment, with the gods, the stars, and the calendar itself. As long as the system worked, the gods were pleased. The rains came, the crops grew, and society held together. This belief wasn't optional. It was the glue that kept millions of people cooperating in a fragile environment that could not forgive mistakes. For centuries, it worked. Cities expanded, populations grew, monuments rose higher and more complex with every generation. From the outside, the Maya looked unstoppable. They had intelligence, they had planning, they had belief. Everything a civilization is supposed to need. And that is exactly what made their collapse so shocking. Because when a society builds its identity around precision, prediction, and control, it leaves very little room for a world that refuses to behave. But no system, no matter how intelligent, can survive a world that stops cooperating.
Act 3. The Fracture.
This wasn't stupidity. These were intelligent people making logical decisions. That's what makes it terrifying. Every system is tested eventually. For the Maya, that test wasn't an invasion. It wasn't a rebellion. It was the rain. For centuries, the Maya world depended on a delicate balance between water, food, and belief. The calendar told them when to plant. The rulers told them the gods were satisfied, and the rains usually came. Until they didn't. Starting in the late 8th century, something changed. The rainy seasons grew shorter. The dry seasons stretched longer. Not enough to cause panic, just enough to cause stress. In a flexible society, this would have been manageable. Adjust planting cycles, move populations, rethink priorities. But the Maya system wasn't built for flexibility. It was built for precision. Their reservoirs were designed for predictable rainfall. Their fields were engineered for specific cycles. Their authority depended on rulers who claimed they could predict the future. When the rains failed once, it was misfortune. When they failed again, it was disturbing. When they failed a third time, the fracture began. Farmers did what humans always do under pressure. They adapted locally. They planted earlier. They moved closer to water. They cut deeper into the forest to survive. But every local adaptation made the larger system weaker. Deforestation reduced rainfall even further. Soil eroded. Reservoirs filled with sediment. The system began eating itself to stay alive. At the same time, the elites doubled down. When the calendar failed to deliver rain, they didn't question the system, they reinforced it. Rituals became more elaborate, monuments grew larger, sacrifices increased, not because they were cruel, but because they were desperate. The logic was simple. If the gods weren't responding, the offering wasn't big enough. This created a fatal divide. The people were adapting to reality. The system was demanding loyalty to prediction.
And once those two paths separated, trust began to collapse faster than food production ever could. City by city, the signs appeared. Construction slowed. Inscriptions stopped mentioning victories and started mentioning survival. Entire cities were abandoned, not burned, not conquered, simply left behind when the system could no longer justify itself. This is the most dangerous phase of any collapse. Not when people are starving, but when they stop believing the system knows what it's doing. Because once belief breaks, coordination breaks. And once coordination breaks, even intelligent societies unravel quietly. The Maya didn't collapse when the rain stopped. They collapsed when the system stopped listening. Act 4. The Descent.
Once the fracture appeared, the descent didn't come all at once. It came unevenly. One city failed, while another held on. One harvest collapsed, while another barely survived. From the outside, the Maya world still looked intact, but inside the system, the margins were gone. And when margins disappear, every mistake becomes fatal. As droughts continued, food shortages spread outward from the most densely populated cities. The great urban centers, once symbols of coordination and abundance, became liabilities. Too many mouths, not enough water. Reservoirs that once sustained tens of thousands now exposed cracked stone at their bottoms. Markets emptied. And when markets empty, something more dangerous follows. Legitimacy begins to drain away. The Maya elite had promised order. The calendar would guide the seasons. The rituals would keep the gods aligned. The system would protect its people. But as food disappeared, those promises turned into questions, and then into anger. Archaeology shows signs of this shift everywhere. Royal monuments defaced, palaces abandoned, thrones left to rot beneath vines. This wasn't invasion, it was rejection. The people weren't overthrowing the system to replace it. They were walking away from it because it no longer worked. And once that began, the collapse accelerated. Without belief, the elites lost their authority. Without authority, coordination vanished. Without coordination, cities couldn't function. Violence followed, not as conquest, but as desperation. Competition over shrinking resources turned neighbor against neighbor. Defensive walls appeared where open plazas once stood. Fortifications grew while temples crumbled. This is the final transformation of a collapsing society, when energy shifts from building the future to protecting what little remains. One by one, the great cities emptied. Tikal, Copan, Calakmul, not in flames, in silence. Families dismantled their homes. Stones once used for monuments were repurposed for survival. People moved outward, towards smaller communities, closer to water, farther from authority. This wasn't a single catastrophe. It was a decision repeated thousands of times. To leave, to stop investing in a system that demanded loyalty but could no longer offer protection. And once enough people made that decision, the system collapsed under its own weight. The calendar stopped being carved. Writing faded from memory. Long-distance trade disappeared. What remained was survival, local, fragmented, and quiet. The Maya didn't fall in a dramatic moment. They dissolved.
and by the time outsiders arrived centuries later, the jungle had already sealed the evidence, reclaiming cities that no longer had a society to defend them. The Maya didn't disappear because they failed to survive. They disappeared because they stopped believing survival required the system at all.
Act 5. The Mirror. It's easy to look at the Maya and feel distant from them. Stone temples, ancient calendars, a jungle that reclaimed their cities. We tell ourselves they were different, primitive, limited by their time. But strip away the stone and the symbols, and the structure of their world starts to feel uncomfortably familiar. The Maya built a society that depended on prediction. They optimized food production, water storage, labor, and belief into a single system. When it worked, it created stability, growth, and confidence. When it stopped working, there was no backup plan, only faith that the system would correct itself. We've built something similar. In 2021, a single container ship got stuck in the Suez Canal. For 6 days, nearly $10 billion a day in global trade froze in place. Factories shut down, shelves went empty, shipping schedules collapsed across continents. Not because we lacked resources, but because the system had no slack. It worked perfectly until one small failure revealed how fragile it actually was. To be fair, we do have something the Maya didn't: real-time information, satellite data, climate models, early warning systems. We can see problems forming. The question is whether we'll use that knowledge or simply watch the data while trusting the system will fix itself. That's the part history doesn't usually emphasize. Civilizations don't fail because they lack intelligence. They fail when intelligence becomes rigidity, when prediction replaces adaptation, when maintaining the system becomes more important than maintaining the people inside it. The Maya didn't think they were living through the end of an era. They thought they were making rational decisions in difficult times. History only labeled it a collapse later. The question isn't whether advanced civilizations can fail. The Maya already answered that. The real question is simpler and far more uncomfortable. If the systems you rely on stopped making sense tomorrow, would you try to fix them, or would you quietly walk away, just like they did? The Maya didn't get a choice about whether their world was ending. We still do, for now.